What would you do if you walked into a barn to buy a horse and found a woman bruised and chained like she had been forgotten by the whole world? Finian Holt never expected his life to split in two that day, before and after the barn. He rode up from Del Rio under a thin, pale sun, tired from days in the saddle. Finian was 34, worn by wind and dust, a quiet man who carried old losses in his eyes. People said he had known more graves than weddings, and the truth was not far from that. His horse moved slow across the dry land as he reached the Burlock place around noon. The ranch looked lifeless. The house stood squat and grey, with dust stuck to its windows like old regret. The barn leaned east as if it had grown too tired to keep standing straight. Chickens wandered without care. A mutt barked once and then gave up. No children laughed. No woman moved around the yard. Only emptiness lived there. The man who greeted Finian was thick around the belly, red in the face, and sweating even in the light breeze. He wiped his hands on stained trousers and tried to smile. "You, Finian Holt. I am. You're here for the sorrel, that's right, she's in the barn. Go take a look. I'll fetch the papers." Finian didn't like the man's voice. Something oily sat beneath it, but he came for a horse, nothing more. He walked toward the barn, leading his own mare by the reins. The yard felt too quiet, like even the dust didn't want to make noise. When he pushed open the barn door, the smell rolled out first. Hay, dung, and something sharper, rust, iron, blood if you knew the scent. Inside was dim, light cut through cracks in the roof in thin stripes. Finian's eyes adjusted slow. The sorrel mare stood in the far stall, a good-looking animal, bright-eyed and calm. But Finian didn't move toward her. Something else was in the shadows. A shape, small, wrong for a barn. He stepped closer. It was a woman. She lay curled on her side near a pile of old tack, wrists chained to the wall by a rusted bolt. Her dress was torn and filthy. Her straight black hair hung in matted clumps. Her skin was covered in bruises in different colors, old and new. A scab on her cheek stretched tight when she breathed. One of her dark, almond-shaped eyes was swollen almost shut. She looked up at him, slow, scared, exhausted, and said nothing. Finian knelt. His hand hovered near her wrist, then her face. "You're hurt bad," he murmured. Still, she did not speak. A board creaked behind him. Finian straightened and turned. The red-faced man stood in the doorway, the bright light framing him like a warning. "She don't talk much," he said. "Found her near the rail line a couple weeks ago. Half dead. I fed her, gave her water. Got her locked up 'cause she's wild, mean as a rattler. Bit my boy Tobin clean through the hand." Finian's jaw tightened, but he kept his face still. "She's got the devil in her, this kind," the man added. "You got papers on her, too, if you want." Finian's voice cut him in half. "I'm here to buy a horse, not a person. That ain't what this is." "Hell, I saved her." Finian took one step. The man's hand twitched toward his revolver, but Finian moved faster. His fist struck the man's jaw hard enough to crack like dry wood. The man fell backward into the dirt outside, moaning. Finian didn't spare him another look. He returned to the woman. "I'm going to get you loose," he said gently. She flinched at his voice, but she didn't pull away when he drew his knife and worked at the bolt. The metal was old, stiff with rust and dried blood. It fought him, but it gave. When he lifted her, she weighed almost nothing, like a shadow held together by breath alone. Finian carried her past the man groaning in the dust, past the sorrel mare, past the yard that had seen too much. He set her on his horse, climbed up behind her, and rode away without looking back. She didn't speak. He didn't ask her name. Some names were buried deep, waiting to be earned again. They rode across the plains until the sun bled into the horizon. By nightfall, they reached a dry creek bed where mesquite grew thick. Finian laid out a blanket and handed her water. She took it with shaking hands. He cooked beans in a dented tin pot. She didn't reach for it at first. He left the bowl near her feet and turned his back. After a long moment, he heard her eat slowly, like each bite hurt. That night, she didn't sleep. Her eyes stayed open, watching every shadow. Finian pretended to sleep, but he stayed awake, too. Something about the way she breathed told him the danger wasn't done. Not by a long shot. By the third day on the trail, she could sit upright again. On the fourth day, she no longer flinched when he came near. On the fifth, her voice finally rose, rough and cracked like old rope. My Finian nodded once. She washed her face in a stream that night until the water ran brown with dirt and blood. When she asked where they were going, Finian said, my land, past Arroyo Blanca. No one comes out there unless they got reason. Why are you helping me? She asked. Finian stared into the fire. A man who keeps quiet while something wrong is happening is already dead. Just don't know it yet. Mai didn't answer, but the next morning, she saddled the sorrel herself. By dusk, they reached Finian's ranch, small but solid, tucked near a ridge where pines whispered in the wind. He showed her the spare room. She stood in the doorway a long time before stepping inside. Finian didn't ask her to stay. He didn't need to. She slept for 2 days straight. Then the real story began. Finian knew the quiet wouldn't last. Mai moved through the ranch like someone learning how to live again. She patched fences with slow, careful hands, fed the goats even when her arms shook, washed her wounds with vinegar and hissed when it burned. She spoke little, but her eyes watched everything like she expected chains to drop from the ceiling at any moment. Finian gave her space. He didn't ask what had happened in that barn. She didn't ask why he helped her. They worked side by side in the long, hot days, but there was always something between them, fear, memory, or maybe the start of something stronger. Then one morning, she was gone. Finian saw the empty saddle first. The sorrel mare missing. Mai's tracks headed east. He followed fast, heart tight in his chest, not from anger, but a strange worry he didn't know how to name. He found her crouched in the brush 10 miles from the Burlock place. She wasn't running, she was watching the homestead. He stepped behind her without sound, but she still knew. I didn't come to go back, she said. I came to see if he's still breathing. Finian's voice stayed even. You think to finish him? I thought to know if he'd die on his own. She stared at the house. No smoke, no voices, no life. I can't live knowing he might still breathe, she whispered. Finian didn't try to stop her. Some things needed confronting. They walked to the house together. Inside, the air was thick with rot, bottles on the floor, blood smeared on the boards. A boy, maybe 15, lay in a corner, clutching his stomach with a dirty rag. He looked up when they entered. You came back, he rasped. Mai froze. Finian stepped slightly in front of her. Where is he? Mai asked. The boy coughed. Gone. Took the wagon south 2 days ago. Said he'd be back with men. Said you'd regret getting loosed. Finian's jaw clenched. Mai stepped forward. I'm not here for you. I ain't a boy, the kid said, eyes hard. I'm the one who held the chain while Pa whipped you. Mai's fingers twitched near her side. Her breathing shook. Finian moved between them fast. Enough. She stared at the boy for a long moment. Then her hand loosened. Her eyes turned cold, not angry, just done. They left him there, the house silent behind them. That night, back at the ranch, Mai scrubbed herself clean in a basin until her skin turned red. Finian waited outside by the fire, listening to the water splash and her breath quicken. When she stepped out, her hair still wet, she stared into the flames. I'm not afraid of him, she said. Finian nodded. I know. But I need to know how to make him afraid of me. Finian met her eyes. Something had settled in her. Something steady, controlled, and dangerous. Then we start tomorrow. The next days changed everything. They trained from before sunrise. Finian taught her how to hold a rifle, how to brace her shoulder so the recoil wouldn't bruise. She learned fast, steady aim, quiet breath, cold focus. You miss your shot, Finian said, watching her reload. "You better be ready to follow with something sharper." She nodded and fired again, hitting a pine knot dead center. They practiced with knives, too. Finian taught her how to stand, how to move her feet, how to strike with strength that didn't rely on size. She listened to every word. No fear, no hesitation. They set traps, snares, tripwires, a false floorboard that dropped weighted nails. Finian made her reset each one blindfolded. "Know your ground better than the men who want to take it," he said. She repeated his lesson until she could rebuild each trap in the dark. At night, she sat by the fire with her knees pulled close, quiet and thinking. Finian didn't push her to talk, but sometimes she did, voice calm, like recounting someone else's memories. "He thought breaking me was a kind of keeping," she said. "Like trapping a bird till it stops trying to fly." Finian spit into the dust. "He won't be thinking anything when you're done." She didn't smile, but her eye softened just a little. Then one evening, a rider appeared on the trail, dust rising behind him. He stopped at the gate and called out. Finian met him first, rifle resting easy in his hands. The rider was lean, a scar down his lip, eyes too sharp to trust. "I come from south of Choya Bend," he said. "Looking for a woman, short hair, talks little, rode off with a man fits your look." Finian didn't answer. The man smirked. "Name's Gideon. My brother's been missing a month. Last seen with a sorrel mare and a busted jaw." "I stepped from the barn then." Her face had healed some, but her eyes were cold fire. Gideon's smile died. "You?" Before he could finish, I spoke. "Tell your brother I'll come find him." Not the other way around. Gideon swallowed, fear flickering behind his eyes. He turned his horse and rode off fast. I watched him disappear. Finian looked at her carefully. "That was a choice I made. You could have killed him. That would have been mercy." Finian didn't argue. 2 days later, they found a trap near the river sprung. Blood on the dirt. A goat gone. "He's testing us," Finian said. I crouched low, I scanning the trail. "He wants us to chase. We won't know," she said. "He'll come here." They fortified the ranch, dug trenches, lined the barn entrance with broken glass and old nails. I wore a pistol low on her hip now, moving like someone who had finally stepped into her own shadow. Then at dusk, smoke rose on the horizon. 3 riders, 1 wagon, Gideon at the front. I stepped forward beside Finian, calm as the settling dust. "They think I'm still afraid," she said quietly. Finian looked at her. "Are you?" She didn't answer because she didn't have to. Dusk settled like a slow warning across the plains. The sky glowed orange at the edges, fading into a deep, bruised purple. Finian stood on the porch with his rifle held low but ready. I stepped forward beside him, shoulders straight, face steady, breath calm. 3 riders approached. Gideon led them. Behind him came 2 hired guns, rough men with easy mouths and ugly hearts. A wagon rolled behind them, empty except for rope and iron. They came not to talk. They came to take her back. But Mai wasn't the same woman they had chained in a barn. Gideon called out, "We're here for the girl. Hand her over and maybe we leave you breathing." Mai stepped past Finian into the open yard. The breeze lifted her hair off her bruised cheek. "Then come take me," she said. Gideon grinned, cruel and sure of himself. He thought she was bluffing. He thought she was still weak. He thought wrong. His hand dropped toward his gun. Too slow. A single shot cracked through the evening air. Gideon's hat flew from his head, spinning into the dirt. The bullet had shaved a line across his temple close enough to take skin. Finian blinked. He hadn't fired. It was Mai. The 2 hired guns jerked back in surprise. Before one could run for cover, Finian fired once, dropping him with a shot to the throat. The other dove behind the wagon, scrambling for safety. He didn't make it. One of Mai's traps, spiked boards hidden under loose dirt, caught his leg. His scream tore across the yard. Gideon stumbled behind the wagon, clutching his bleeding temple. My walk toward him slowly, steady, cold. Not shaking, not afraid. Finian followed behind her, covering every angle with his rifle. But Mai didn't need him now. This was her storm, her reckoning. Gideon tried to lift his pistol. You? He cried through clenched teeth. You don't have the guts. Her bullet hit his shoulder. He spun, fell, crawled in circles in the dirt, pain twisting his face. You should have died in that barn, he gasped. Mai kept walking. You held the chain, she said. And you smiled while I bled. He tried to crawl backward, boots kicking hopelessly. I was following orders. It wasn't me. It wasn't my choice. Mai knelt beside him, her voice steady and clear. You enjoyed it. That's what makes you worse, Gideon sobbed as she lifted her pistol, but she didn't let him beg. She didn't need to hear it. She fired once. His body sagged still. Mai stood up slowly, breathing deep, looking at her hands like she wasn't sure they belonged to her anymore. Finian stepped beside her. You done? She looked at the sky, at the barn, at the dirt still shaking from the fight. For now, she said. They buried the bodies far from the ranch, under flat stones on dead ground where nothing grew. Mai worked the shovel without stopping, as if she had waited years for the weight of dirt to feel this final. When they finished, she washed in silence. Finian watched her from the porch, knowing this wasn't the end. Not for her, not for what had been done. For weeks afterward, the ranch settled into a strange calm. Mai woke early, fed the animals, tended the land. She moved with purpose, but little peace. Some days she laughed once or twice, a sound Finian had never imagined she could make. Other days, her eyes looked far away, like she was walking through old memories. Finian didn't push. Healing wasn't a straight road. Revenge wasn't either. But one morning he found her sitting on the ridge overlooking the valley, boots dusty, hands folded in her lap, eyes hard. They won't stop with him, she said. Men like that don't die alone. Finian sat beside her. No, they don't. I don't want fear anymore, she whispered. I want memory. I want them to know. I remember. Finian took a slow breath. Then we find the others. She turned her head. You'd help me. I started this, he said. I won't let you finish alone. The wind rolled across the ridge, cold and steady. Mai closed her eyes for a moment, letting it touch the parts of her heart that had been locked away. When she opened them again, something new lived there. Not fear, not anger. Purpose. Finian rode into town that same afternoon. He returned with rifles, powder, wire coils, and a tin box filled with names. Names spoken in whispers, names of men who walked free while others suffered in silence. Mai opened the box and saw the names written on folded slips. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't tremble. I'm going to find them, she said. Finian nodded. We'll start at first light. So they rode west, north, south, across hard country, through towns with voices that carried old sins, through places where silence hid the wicked. Together they hunted men who thought the past would stay buried. Mai became a shadow whispered in saloons, a warning spoken at campfires, a name carved into fear. Finian became the quiet storm at her side, steady and fierce in his loyalty. But somewhere in all that blood and dust, something else grew too. Not fast, not loud, but real. One evening, months after the barn, after the graves, after the smoke and the pain, Finian found Mai sitting by a fire, warming her hands. She looked at him. Really looked. You saved me, she said softly. Finian shook his head. No. You saved yourself. I just cut the chain. She stared at the flames. What do we do now? Finian watched her like a man watching dawn break over land he thought was lost. We live, he said. If you want to, she nodded, slow and certain. I think I do. They built a small home near the ridge. A place where the land was quiet and the past felt distant. A place where she planted sage and learned to breathe again. A place where Finian finally smiled without pain behind it. My still carried her pistols. Finian still watched the trail at night. Danger didn't vanish. Memory didn't fade. But life grew anyway. And one evening, as the sun dipped low and the wind carried the smell of pine across the valley, Mai said, "It's quiet now." Finian took her hand. For the first time since the barn, Mai let someone hold it. The road behind them was made of fire. The road ahead was made of healing, and they walked it together.